Have you ever stopped to think about the literal electrical wiring that keeps your entire body moving and feeling? Because our peripheral nerves are exactly that. They are these incredibly delicate yet absolutely crucial cables that bridge our brain to our muscles and skin. But what happens when that wiring actually gets damaged? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to unpack the fascinating life cycle of a nerve lesion, taking you from the exact moment of a traumatic injury all the way to the absolute cutting-edge science of rehabilitation and recovery. So here's our clinical roadmap for this explainer. We'll quickly start with nerve anatomy, look at how nerves actually break, dive into the cellular demolition process, explore muscle atrophy, cover prevention techniques, and wrap up with modern rehabilitation. Let's get right into it.
Part 1. Anatomy of a peripheral nerve. The blueprint. Okay, to truly understand how a nerve breaks, we first have to know how it's built. Think of a healthy peripheral nerve just like a heavy-duty underground fiber optic cable. Deep inside, we have what's called a fascicle, a tightly organized group of nerve fibers. The individual axons are each encased in this super delicate layer called the endoneurium. Group those together, and they're wrapped tightly in a protective cellular barrier called the perineurium. Now, this perineurium is amazing. It's a continuous, concentric layer of cells that maintains pressure and physically blocks mechanical and chemical injuries. Finally, groups of these fascicles are bundled together by the epineurium, which is the thickest, outermost connective tissue casing. So it's literally layers upon layers of protection.
But a nerve isn't just a static piece of wire, right? It's a living organ with a highly delicate two-part blood supply. On the outside, we have the extrinsic vascular system. Those are the arteries and veins resting in the outer epineurium. On the inside, the intrinsic vascular system features these tiny, longitudinal capillaries running deep within the fascicles themselves. And this blood supply is incredibly fragile. A direct injury here can easily cause an intravascular hematoma, basically a bleed inside the nerve, leading to ischemia or localized oxygen starvation. And that can rapidly destroy the nerve from the inside out.
Moving on to Part 2. How nerves get injured. Data-driven destruction.
So, despite all those incredible layers of protection we just talked about, a peripheral nervous system is highly susceptible to everyday mechanical trauma. The epidemiological data actually points the finger squarely at motor vehicle collisions. They drive an astonishing 46% of all severe nerve injuries, with motorcycle accidents adding another 9.9%. These everyday accidents are the main culprits behind severe mechanical stretch and compression injuries. For example, the severe traction you might experience during a car crash can literally pull a nerve past its inherent elastic limit, resulting in a complete physical rupture.
When these injuries happen, clinicians classify the severity using the Seddon and Sunderland scales. At the very top, a first-degree or neuropraxia injury means the physical components are perfectly intact. They're just locally demyelinated. Spontaneous recovery usually happens in a few weeks. But as we move down to second and third degree, which fall under axonectomesis, the axons themselves are actually severed, and internal scarring begins to block recovery. By the time we hit fourth degree, there is dense internal scar tissue completely blocking any regeneration, making surgery absolutely mandatory. And fifth degree, nertmesis, that's a complete physical transection. The nerve is cut completely in half. So the severity of the internal tear entirely dictates the difference between spontaneous recovery and needing a surgical graft.
All right, Part 3. The cellular demolition process, also known as Wallerian degeneration.
This is where things get wild. When a nerve is severely severed, the part that's separated from the cell body doesn't just, passively rot away. It undergoes a highly regulated, active, controlled demolition. Step 1. Within hours of the injury, a massive calcium influx basically tells the axon to actively self-destruct. It dismantles its own cytoskeleton. Step 2. The surrounding Schwann cells, which normally insulate the nerve, undergo a total phenotypic shift. They upregulate a transcription factor called CJON, telling them to shed their myelin and enter a repair mode. Step 3. Macrophages are recruited from the bloodstream to act as a cleanup crew, phagocytosin and clearing out all that inhibitory myelin debris. And finally, Step 4. The Schwann cells align into longitudinal columns called the bands of Bungner. They are physically building guiding tubes to support and direct a new nerve sprout as it desperately tries to grow back. Which brings us to Part 4, muscle atrophy and contractures. Essentially, the stakes. While the nerve is busy trying to regenerate through those guiding tubes, what is happening to the paralyzed muscle waiting at the end of the line? Well, without electrical signals, it faces a rapidly shrinking window for recovery. In months 1 and 2 post-injury, the muscle goes through acute mass loss and hypertrophy. The tissue architecture shrinks, but, and this is key, it remains highly receptive to reinnervation. Now in months 3 to 6, things get much worse. We see myofibrillar disarray and a massive degradation of the muscle's internal structures. And if no electrical signal returns past the 7-month mark, we hit a critical point: terminal fibrosis and lipodystrophy. The muscle tissue undergoes irreversible fibrofatty degeneration. The window for successful reinnervation actively closes because thick scar tissue and fat have completely taken over.
At a microscopic level, this functional loss is absolutely devastating. A healthy skeletal muscle has these highly ordered triads, or calcium release units, perfectly aligned with mitochondria. This is the excitation-contraction coupling apparatus. It's the exact machinery that turns an electrical signal into a physical muscle twitch. But look at a long-term denervated muscle. These triads are completely disorganized and degraded, and the mitochondria are entirely displaced. Because this mechanical apparatus is physically dismantled, the muscle literally loses its ability to receive electrical signals.
Furthermore, this prolonged paralysis leads to severe physical deformities called contractures. When a joint is left completely immobile, a chronically shortened muscle can rapidly lose up to 40% of its serial sarcomeres within mere weeks. Compounding this, the absolute lack of movement creates a hypoxic environment, starving the tissue of oxygen, which triggers severe fibrosis. The muscle physically transforms from a compliant, stretchy tissue into a rigid, non-yielding structure that drastically limits joint movement.
So, knowing how devastating this cellular damage can be, it begs a pretty important question. How do we prevent iatrogenic or medically induced nerve injuries during medical procedures like regional anesthesia and peripheral nerve blocks? If doctors are placing needles right next to these delicate structures, how do we keep them from accidentally causing the very damage we just discussed? Let's dive into Part 5, Prevention and Monitoring, Protecting the Nerve.
To safely navigate needles right next to these delicate nerve structures, doctors use a whole suite of advanced monitoring tools. First is simply patient feedback. The elicitation of severe pain or paresthesia during an injection is a major red flag for intravesicular entry. Second is ultrasound visualization to watch the needle in real time. Third is peripheral nerve stimulation. If a motor response happens at a tiny electrical current of less than 0.5 milliamps, it strongly indicates the needle is dangerously close, or even inside the nerve. Fourth is opening injection pressure monitoring, and finally, measuring electrical impedance. The absolute crucial point here is that relying on just one of these methods is insufficient. To prevent a catastrophic injection directly into a fascicle, clinicians absolutely must use a combination of these monitors.
And there is one critical limit in anesthesiology you really need to know: 15 psi. Research shows that if an injection pressure hits or exceeds 15 psi, the needle has likely penetrated a poorly compliant space, like inside the highly pressurized, delicate nerve fascicle itself. Hitting this pressure limit should prompt the immediate cessation of the injection to protect the nerve from a traumatic rupture.
Finally, Part 6, Rehabilitation and Recovery, Rebuilding the Connection.
If a nerve is damaged and that terrifying timeline of atrophy we talked about has started, how do we fix it? Well, we exploit the nervous system's incredible neuroplasticity. Current research notes that home-based functional electrical stimulation protocols can literally stimulate the structural reorganization and realignment of the disassociated ECC apparatus. By applying long-duration, high-intensity electrical impulses directly to the paralyzed muscle through rehab, we can reconstruct those vital triad calcium release units we discussed earlier that had completely degraded. The results of this targeted electrical training are nothing short of incredible. It drives muscle fiber hypertrophy, making the surviving fibers bulk up and grow larger again. It triggers the regeneration of entirely new myofibers. It actively reverses that devastating fat infiltration we saw earlier in phase 3 of denervation. And finally, by repositioning the mitochondria back exactly where they belong, it completely restores metabolic efficiency. We are quite literally rescuing degenerated, paralyzed muscle through targeted electricity. Which brings us to a final, pretty provocative question. If a targeted electrical impulse can reconstruct degraded muscle at a microscopic cellular level and actively reverse supposedly irreversible fibrosis, what other limits of human cellular recovery are just waiting to be unlocked? The future of electrical stimulation, neuroplasticity, and nerve rehabilitation holds immense, untapped potential for medicine. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep wondering, keep learning, and as always, keep exploring the incredible machinery of the human body.